The Why Didn't You Test That podcast want to improve your software. Join Hugh, Rich, and their guests. They share experiences and insights on the many sides of better software delivery.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We should be standing there with one finger up in the air like that BBC presenter now, really, shouldn't we? Welcome, Nalin Parbhu, a good friend of mine. We have spent a bit of a theme here every time we introduce someone. We've usually spent a lot of time in conferences or sitting around somewhere solving world peace, as usual. Nalin is one of the few people that actually goes out and does it, so especially in the IT world. So just a quick intro to Nalin. He's been with, I guess you founded or were the brains or the driving force between a company called Infuse. I'd encourage you to have a look at it. I guess, Nalin, like everyone who's kind of run a small company, you've done a bit of everything. You start off in product development. Infuse has developed their own test automation tools and also have, which we've integrated with over the years, and they've been very well engineered, very well structured, all API based, very easy for us to plug them in, which we like to see. And obviously, specialist in test automation, and test automation is pretty much useless unless you have a plan as to when to use it, why to use it, and where it fits into your whatever your latest buzzword strategy is, DevOps, SciOps, AIOps, whatever. So I guess you're all about driving quality engineering and best practice. And I suppose most of the recently, I mean, the work that we've been doing with you is kind of in the higher education space, which is, I guess, where you've done a lot of work recently, yeah? Does that make sense?
Right, Hugh. Yeah, I've gone back to university, reversed back my life about 30 years, and looked at higher education as a market. There's 200 universities that have a sort of fairly common platforms from an architectural perspective, but they have a very it's a very informal outlook towards IT. Traditional outlook where, well, back when I was uni, they supplied computers and printers and and rolls and whatever else, and in a way, the digital, the supply chain within the university is still treated like that. So they're still very much a supplier of services, even though what they do is quite critical to the business of the universities. If the virtual learning environment doesn't work, students can't learn, they can't do exams. If the student information system doesn't work, they can't get money for their funding and the HESA returns from student loans company, but it's still treated as a bunch of people in the basement that supply printers.
Yeah, I think we've sort of right at the very beginning we talked about the fact that most companies are IT companies now. Banks, insurance companies, they're predominantly IT companies. I mean, when I worked for Eagle Star, there was probably about 5 actuaries, and there was 1,000 people employed. So what was everyone else doing? They were basically managing the claims, which were paper based, which gradually turned to so everything's IT now. So I think we'll come back to this in a minute, but I think one of the things you said when we were chatting before was, it seems that in higher education they're interested in becoming much more professional about the way they approach IT. I think that's one of the things you said. So we won't talk about that straight away, but let's just hang that there to talk about. But however, before we do that, let's just have a quick round table on Fujitsu and what you thought about what's going on there. I mean, I've got some fairly obvious things to say about it, and I think. Well, let's just start with Rich. What's your take on it?
It's controversial, isn't it? I think the IT fault is like the spark, and it gets a bit too much attention. I think there's a systemic corporate failure in a lot of what the story is, both in terms of Post Office's role and Fujitsu's role. I've been watching a lot of the inquiry, and a lot of the questions when I've been involved in incidents, by no means any size of what this one is, but when I've been involved in incidents, first and foremost, you go back to kind of what's the kind of the governance, what's the SDLC, what's the proven path that you're supposed to be following, right? And I've not seen any of that kind of conversation. I've not seen anyone kind of make reference to it. It all seems a bit almost people trying to do a good job, but without a lot of direction. And I think those incidents, there was IT incidents that were flagged up in like 2006, and they were flagged up in like defect management tools, etc., etc. How did they not float up through the various boards, that both organizations would have been having at various stages of, IT development into delivery into, the prosecutions? How did that not then get a continual feedback around those IT incidents? And that not then get disclosed in the problem. So to me, yes, almost the root cause were, yes, an IT fault and a terrible system that didn't have the love and care to get better over time. But there's a much bigger corporate governance problem that existed, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was kind of my sort of first point. It was going to be the robust and honest pass of information up and down the chain was absolutely not there. I think there was obviously politics, and probably, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but the post office was outsourced, and therefore it was all supposed to be, sort of brand spanking new and wonderful. Therefore, you don't want to get bad news. It's a little bit like we talked about this quite big American company where they're not allowed to use the word bug, but there definitely did not seem to be a robust conversation going up and down. So that's the first point. The second point is that it's a sort of, I mean, we've been brought in as advisors on a lot of these projects, and as soon as we come in on, some of the big healthcare ones, some of the big government ones, first of all, the people that are tendering it have absolutely no clue in terms of, how to specify, and how my friend's a purchasing manager, and he's just horrified by the way that these go out to tender and their ability to control them and the ability to control what the deliverable is, to be able to understand the decision gates, to be able to understand the complexity of a system and the complexity of a change, which is monster. You make a tiny change, and government comes out with some magical, oh yeah, we need this in, and then suddenly you think about the amount of testing that would involve, So I think there's all the classic stuff, and obviously these systems weren't modeled correctly. They might have had a few basic user stories, but they certainly didn't have a robust set of tests to confirm that they actually worked correctly, which I think is pretty fundamental to IT, and is probably one of the biggest flaws at the moment, is people don't really understand what an expected result and actual result is, and how to actually test those, because you're not only testing the requirements, you're testing the code, you're testing the assumptions, you're testing the user understanding, etc., etc. So there's all that stuff obviously was going on in pockets, or not going on at all, would seem to be, and certainly of the projects that I've seen. And then the other one is just that this idea of obviously, they were rolling stuff out rapidly to fix stuff, which is just a recipe for carnage, because you're creating bad data, and the bad data was basically, lots of debt, and, you had GL balances going somewhere, and then, the fact that there wasn't pretty much audit stamps and everything, so it should have been absolutely easy to go into and say, right, this is the information that's flowed into our systems, this information that's flowed into another system, let's just compare the two. You've got a token or a GUID which compares the two, and you say, yeah, match, don't match, fine, sorted. all of that stuff's just kind of basic IT 101 now, or IT 101 back in the day, when Nalin, well, I'm a lot older than Nalin, even though I look younger than him in the picture, you can tell. That's how we design systems. You made sure that there was an audit trail. You made sure that there was something in there to know where this came from, because, and especially nowadays with the growth of APIs and messages, you have no idea. So, if you have a message that goes over and it doesn't apply because a queue goes down or something like that, and then it applies later and the timestamps are out of a sequence, and then later you don't have a matching thing. All of that stuff just sounds like a complete and utter recipe for catastrophe. So, all of that is generalized about very large IT projects, especially in the public sector, for the ones that I've come across anyway. Nalin, what are your thoughts?
I think my experience of large projects is you can give information as a test person, and I can talk about a project that I worked on a couple of years ago at a large telco. You give results out to a customer. What goes up the chain, you have no control of, right? And it sounds to me that there's been a lot of that going on at the post office. You say, hey, it's bad, it's not looking good, we shouldn't do this, and someone just presented a report on the program management team saying it's green or it's amber, right? and perpetuated the lie over a number of years, and now they've just gone, right, you're going to go live, right, and we're gonna cover it up as operational issues. And if you go to someone powerful enough, like a minister, or in this project it was a member of royalty, that they'd gone up to and made a promise in the project that I worked on, they have to go live on that day, and then someone's got to be blamed for it, right, or they've got to cover it up. And in this instance, they found a way of using operational issues, which was the postmaster, and saying that they're stealing. And I was talking to a colleague of mine that Hugh knows, who's also as ancient, a guy called Marcus. And so I said to him, I go, the only thing that came out of me when all this was happening, and I remember when the first prosecutions were happening, my dad bid for a post office in the 90s, part of his expansion, and he got rejected on the basis of his CV. And I just said, good things happen for a reason, right? It's like, can you imagine, right? And it probably wouldn't have been my dad, it would have been my Uncle Kieran who would have been put in there, right? He could have probably been in jail by now. So it's there's a lot of innocent people that just trying to run simple small businesses, shopkeepers, that got done out of this, right? And it's horrific, right?
I mean, the thing I found a bit weird is that they couldn't get anyone from IT to talk. I mean, they had the Computer Weekly guys who, to be honest, aren't IT people. They're just journos. And all you really got to do is just meander into a pub and hang around with anyone on a project, because we all gossip. We're terrible for gossiping, and you would know instantly what's going on. So I don't quite know why people were being so hesitant unless they had the world's most scary NDA going on there. But even then, you can generally find out. And this idea that you're not allowed to access production data to make changes is, I mean, that's an absolute function of every project. If you do a load and it fails halfway through, you've got to go in and delete the ones that because you had a broken transaction boundary, so you delete the ones that didn't make it and then start it halfway through again. So there's someone issuing a piece of SQL in there or whatever it is to be able to do that. So everyone knows that in IT. It would be almost unimaginable to not have some kind of backdoor to be able to do that. So that everyone thought that was like the smoking gun. It's like, sorry, there's guns everywhere. So anyway, enough about that.
Just on that point, just very quickly, I think it's interesting in terms of when you look at the formal channels that organisations put in place, and this is not specific to the post office or Fujitsu, I don't think. I think this is a problem with complex organisations. The ability to float up systemic problems within those channels. If you look at the Fujitsu defects finding resolutions, there was a fix proposed that was supposed to go up through those channels, but it didn't get taken on as a systemic thing. It was almost diminished into this is a one-off. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an issue, right, in this. How are things seen as systemic? And to me, it comes back into that corporate governance, right, in terms of how are you adhering to the SDLC? What risks are you systemically taking as the organisation? It's really hard in these large organisations to get something raised up to material risk takers to get them to take it seriously. And I think there's a real problem in the way that large organisations work today that means that isn't easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's also how some companies behave. We have been asked to do test maturity or test assessments of system integrators by large companies. And for some reason, they've asked the system integrator to procure us to do the maturity on their homework. And I recall watching another one of these shows, which is, Hugh talked about gaming the system. Well, if you ask us to produce a report and you own the deliverable, you can decide what you're going to show, right, to the customer.
Yeah.
So I can put up a mirror. It's not going to be a nice looking baby, and you just say, right, okay, I'll take those two bits and say, all right,
absolutely.
I've gone to Infuse and I said that, and if they go to me and say, did you say that? I'll be like, I did.
Yeah, there's another interesting one. You got to look at the incentives, right? And this is where you get into especially external auditors that are also have a consultancy arm on them as well, right? And you look at some of the findings; they're incentivized to say certain things or not to get business, right? And that's a real problem as well. And audits would have taken place over a very long period of time in that place, and it doesn't take long to find the skeletons, right? They're all in the same places, but yet they weren't found. You got to, why not? Why weren't they found?
Okay, interesting. That was a bit of a tangent, but hopefully interesting. So, Nalin, why don't you talk to us? I mean, obviously, I think we've kind of covered a fair amount of stuff, around the space of automation and the problems with automation. But I'm sort of curious to know about the, higher education. Like, just if you just talk sort of practically about how it, how it rolls, in that world, the level of automation, the level of understanding. But then also come back to this point about, there's obviously a desire. They're obviously very, very bright people, and hopefully they're used to peer reviews and all the kind of things that sort of, are sort of built into the concept of scientific science and academe. So, how do you sort of think about, using that brain power and knowledge and approach to be able to turn it into a much more professional way of delivering IT?
So higher education has a very different way. What it teaches and what it practices are two different things, right? So my observation is that they're all kind of moving to the cloud, but they buy a bunch of package applications. Some have developed their own systems, but mainly they've bought package applications. They've integrated them by point-to-point integration, data transfers, flat files going all over the place. And every time you do an assessment of their architecture, it's literally a spaghetti bowl of integrations. And so what happens is that every time they upgrade, what happens? The integration also breaks as well, right? So they have these point upgrades. The integration also breaks. So one of the things that I was surprised about is that they're starting to move to ESB, right? And this is something that they're doing in 2024, right? This is stuff we were talking about in 1990s, right? But ESB is the big trend in higher education. Let's get a modern bus and put that in. And if you talk to them about things like event streaming, that's too far gone, right? They want to go with their traditional ESBs. They want to put that in, integrate. So if you change any of the edges, then actually the systems will still work. So and then the other thing that they don't do is the UK higher education space is it's dominated by the top 24. Top 24 universities take 97% of the funding in the UK, and the rest share it. And that's a big long tail of 170 odd universities, right, ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 to your sub 15, 20,000. So they get their money from going to foreign students or increasing their student numbers, and that's the only two ways they get money. And to deliver their services, they need to have a digital way of delivering, right? And so the big sort of transformation kind of came with COVID, because when they had to do remote delivery, then everything had to go online, and so lecturers had to do what we're doing now, right? Broadcast like we are, issue their lecture notes online, take exams online, but they did this on a lot of on-prem systems, right, which had limited capacity from a performance and a scalability and a functional perspective. So the answer for them is like, okay, let's go cloud, which seems to be sensible. So they've gone cloud, but from a delivery point of view, they still got the testing done by the end user. So so there's IT does this technical bit, which is almost like an operations team. Let's do a patch, let's do an upgrade, and then the business will do the testing. Now that's gone to the vendor, and the business now has to do testing 6 times a year or every month. And so they somehow, a lot of them somehow do it and get away with it, but quite a few do come a cropper because they've customized these systems 15 years ago. Because every university, my observation, and they're probably not going to like it, is that they're all the same, right? And I've attended 2 and met 30, right? So they teach a course, they have lectures, they have a timetabling. From a functional business perspective, they are the same, but every university thinks it's special, right? So customizes its system, it makes it unmaintainable, difficult to patch, difficult to upgrade. So they don't go to what I call a true shared cloud. They go to a true single instance cloud of their customized system run by the vendor, which they pay maximum amount of money for, right? It's great for the vendor that's hosting their student information system or whatever. But they still have the same problem that they do this upgrade, and then the business tests it, and the business now is doing it 6 times a year. And then they've also got the problem with cost, because university budgets from an IT perspective are not very high. They have tight operational budgets because if fee income's going down, inflation's eaten into it, but they have reasonably high capex budgets, right? So there's an incentive from if you're a vice chancellor of the uni, you've got a big budget of capex. You'll put up a building, you'll get your name on there, Professor Nalin Parbhu building, right? And but you're not going to get your name on an IT system, right? So your CIO will say, I need more money, I can deliver this faster, but there's not a proactive sense that this is a good idea until someone else does it or it goes wrong, right? So it's really reactive, right? If Oxford, if King's College does it, then UCL will do it, or or vice versa, right? But none of them will do it unless someone else does it first. So there's real sort of I don't want to be the first because I don't want to be the first to fail. Because if I try something new and I fail, I'm going to get fired. And then the other thing is that the reason why it's reactive is CIOs don't traditionally have a board don't have a place in the main board in the university. So while they're setting direction and strategy around what they're going to do as a business, they get told what they're going to do afterwards. Right, write me an IT strategy. Here's my 9-year vision. I'm the vice chancellor. Write me an IT strategy that now fits in that. Right, instead of them participating in that, where digital delivery should be part of that strategy from the vice chancellor. Right, it's not at all. Right. They might say,
sorry, I'm just going to cut in here because I'm in Swansea at the moment, but obviously Oxford is kind of where I live some of the time. It's glacial. I mean, nothing happens in university. That everything works on a 4 or 5 year cycle, so that any students who kick up will have gone. If they complain about something, they just wait. They just wait it out. I'm just going to go and tell quite a funny story. One of my friends is a restaurateur, and COVID came along, and they said, it was one of the university sort of funding, sitting on, I don't know, billions of money, and they own lots of properties. So he said, "Oh, could you help us out?" They said, "Oh, yes, very happy to help. Well, we're going to let you pay weekly." So yes, excellent. That was the help for universities. So I mean, we are talking just they're so Oxford was the only one I'm really familiar with. They're trying to get anything done in Oxford is just glacial. It ain't going to happen very quickly. And then they've got an advantage is that people they've got a bit of a closed shop there. But if they were trying to compete in the real world, they'd be absolutely dead, would be my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them live off the back of their brand names, right? So if you've got the big brand, then that's going to attract people anyway. Especially like if you've got 30% of your income through international students, then they're going to pay the 30 grand a year fees, right? But if you're a local student paying 9 grand and you're coming out with 50 grand debt, which I find unfathomable, to be honest.
Yeah.
I went to uni. It's shocking, right? What
Yeah.
you get. It's not very good IT.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even an IT user like my son, right? Who wants it working instantly, right? It's fairly functional, rudimentary IT stuff. Not cool at all, right? So they do try and they are. But that being said, and there are some unis that are actually trying to implement professionalization in IT, but they're the ones with the big pockets, right? So they've got proper test teams set up. So UCL and King's College are 2 examples of universities that have got proper setups and trying to do agile transformation and actually understanding that agile transformation isn't just chopping up waterfall into 2-week chunks, but actually requires proper planning and trying to do that at scale, and is actually a journey over many years. And I think that they understand that's over 3 to 5 years. But uni's not the only ones doing it, right? Lots of people are saying, yeah, we do agile, but what they've done is take what they're doing is mini waterfall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also when we're doing agile, they actually don't have testing as part of the effort. So it's some of the lessons learned that I'm going through.
So when you say that, is it more kind of user acceptance kind of testing? I guess bigger question than that is what does a typical SDLC, if you like, I'm intrigued. I know you mentioned that you kind of a lot of the systems are kind of off the shelf, and then everyone kind of goes bespoke on their own kind of wants and desires. How does the kind of the almost the traditional SDLC work in a university in terms of who makes the upfront decisions, you know, the development, and how does that university get involved in, you know, articulating the processes, designing, developing, into testing, into what happens? How do they get involved, and not as the case may be?
A lot of them still operate kind of what I call Prince 2 type of PMO processes. So they go through the T0 type process where they put in a business case, what they need to do. You know, it goes to a committee for funding, and then it gets approved for funding. Then, in my opinion, that's kind of where it starts to slip a little bit, right? That bit is okay, right? People have agreed this. I want a muffin, and it needs to have blueberries in it, and you know, it needs to be gluten free. And then it goes, you know, into type of where the sourcing, and people don't define where the blueberries need to come from. You know, is it gluten free in a warehouse where there's non-gluten free, or is it pure gluten free products, or is there gluten products there? You know, that's kind of where the you know, in that requirement stage, that's kind of where it starts to go wrong. And then with those sort of what I call, you know, requirements in a slight funk, they go to procurement. The procurement is done a little bit like, give me some printers. So the procurement is typically turnkey, right? But procurement should have actually, here's my requirements, here's my functional requirements, here's my non-functional requirements, here's my acceptance tests against those non-functional requirements, here's the evidence that I want you to prove that you met the requirements, and here's my acceptance procedure and strategy. And then I'm going to take, you know, and then and you'll take care of the system testing. You'll show me your system testing with stubs, because this is the integrations that you're going to play with, and here's my integration catalog that you need to stub out, you know, and prove that you've done that. None of that exists, right? But inevitably they take on this stuff. It's a vendor loves it, right? Because the vendor goes, right, and deliver it, and they go, oh, it doesn't work with that. They go, oh, but that's a change. Change, right? So it's non-stop change requests, right? So the vendor's very happy, university is very unhappy, right? Because it's now starting to pay for change, and that capex budget is getting worn down. And you know, dare I say, you know, the bigger the SI, the more change requests go through, right? So you know, I know of one university that spent 15 million quid implementing Salesforce, right?
What?
Yeah. It's horrific, right?
Yeah.
By a Big Four accountancy firm / system integrator, right? So
probably got lovely, very big, nice offices, and very big atrium. My wife always complains about the size of the atrium. She can always sell the ego of the managing director by the size of the atrium. Strangely, when it's a very small atrium, it's usually a woman is the CEO or the managing director. Says it's a door, you just come through it. You don't need a big atrium. Anyway.
But inevitably that's part of the problem. And that's something I've seen commonly over the last 9 years. And then there's a bit.
Is that recognised as a problem?
I think the larger universities recognise it. The university that spent 15 million quid on Salesforce still hasn't learned its lesson.
All right.
Wow.
No. They don't recognise the value of testing.
I mean, Rich, I'm just going to talk about Rich a little bit, because when he was, this is my paraphrasing it, I might have turned it into a bit of a legend, or turned you into a bit of a legend here, Rich. But I remember you guys were very good at being able to control the SIs in terms of giving them very clear, this is what we expect you to do, here are the inputs and here are the outputs, here's your expected results. So that when they ran their systems and did their development and did this, then this is exactly what they were supposed to deliver. And that really nailed them down, because they couldn't get away with sending it back over. So in other words, it was a very clear requirement that was coming through, with lots of examples and lots of sort of stubs ready, well prepared, and input data, and you know, a much richer set of user stories, a much richer set of test cases. So you know, it's like everything. If you probably spent maybe 5 days preparing a really decent pack and sent that over the fence, rather than spending 1 day, or you know, leaving dangling bad requirements, chuck them over the fence commence, and then you spend the next 4 weeks fixing what they send back, and then magically about 9 of them turn into change requests, and that's £220,000 or whatever it is. So I think, Rich, is that fair in terms of what you managed to do?
Yeah, I guess it comes back. The reason I asked the question, you got to look at the incentives, right? And that a lot of the contracts we would have worked with were T&M, and therefore they were incentivized to put bums on seats. And yes, you get some in kind of the change request incentives. And from our point of view, how can we minimize that bad behavior stroke incentive as much as we can, recognizing that they are there to make money, and therefore, don't take the mickey. We will enable you to do a good job and make your cut. And then if we make a cock up, which we inevitably will, how do we share that accountability? To me, that's where the kind of the root of my question was coming from, in terms of whether it's recognized, because if almost let them get away with it, they will, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're doing now is we're working with a lot of people, and the head of digital and the CIO saying, look, if you're going to do an ITT, we're happy to have an input. We'll just do it as a value add, right? So we've got 2-3 large universities. I'll look at it FOC, just say, look, here's some bits, because some standard stuff in a good solid ITT, when you're going out saying, right, system integrator, put in whatever, an ERP or student information system. These you need to have certain sections now. Let's be like going, right, these are sections that you need to have them in there, and add in what you want as acceptance criteria. Your requirements need to be refined a little bit more, so why don't you work with them on that? And I know it's going to take maybe another 3 weeks for your procurement, but you've been working on this business case for about 2 years anyway, right? So another 3 weeks should not be killing you, right? Okay, you might miss the board, the bid meeting, but what you'll do is you'll get someone giving you an honest price of what this all means. Yeah. And I think what a couple of the unis are doing, the ones that are doing agile, is actually they're not even procuring big projects. They're procuring it as small piecemeal pieces of work. So they've broken down their big program into small. So they're going, right, we've got a big transformation program, but we're going to cut it into small increments, and that's all we're going to give out to the SI. So they say to the SI, right, you've got an opportunity on this 3-year program, but we're only going to give you a term worth of work.
Yeah, prove your value in that short sprint, and then we can incentivize you to do the next kind of one.
Correct, and then we'll keep you going that way, and that's the way they want to work. So and they'll pay. They won't worry too much about the rates, because they know they're going to get the product more right the first time. So just slight nuances in terms of how you're procuring. But historically it's always procured in this way. Because they don't. A lot of the universities don't have big IT departments, so you might get a 20,000 person university, but it might only have 80 people running its entire IT. So if you imagine a 20,000 person business, turning over 200 to 300 million pounds with 80 people running its entire IT, it's probably a bit underspent, right?
Yeah, because I assume universities don't have kind of IT development capabilities. They're kind of the run side of things, right? They keep the things ticking over.
Yeah, so development side is very minimal, right? It's mainly around the web. On the integrations, they'll take the integrations and they'll develop APIs themselves. So those that are implemented ESB, they'll take on system integration internally, but all the external configuration of systems will happen by an external vendor. System integration is internally, and for those universities, they're starting to look at testing. They look at SIT and UAT almost as a single phase, right? So they're getting a bit better, but a lot of them are still, they use the right terms, right? We do risk-based testing. What they mean by doing risk-based testing is that they don't really do much testing, right?
We do what we think is important until the time runs out, right?
They go, we don't change it too much, so we just work on that little bit. So and they get away with it. So if you get away with it, I mean, you'll do it, won't you? I mean, that's human nature, right? If you got away with it, then you built 3 or 4 years of getting away with it, you'll continue getting away with it, right? And then
absolutely. Because I was reading some of the things you shared, and there's an interesting theme around spikes in the year that are very predictable when things tend to go wrong. So the UCAS clearing one is an obvious one where I hate the word non-functional requirement, but that kind of scenario, you can understand that actually no one really put any thought into capacity management around that system, and what kind of load might we very well expect at that very predictable time of the year, right?
That's right. So and clearing's an interesting one, right? Because you've got the UCAS side, but you've also got the universities. So each university sets itself up as a mini call center with anything between 150 and 300. Or one university does 400 call agents, and so you get A-level results, and the calls start coming in about 8 in the morning, and they're spiking in at 5 calls per second.
Yeah.
And that means the whole uni cannot. If it's on IP phones, that basically means that nothing else is happening on that uni, right?
Yeah.
Don't use the internet. Don't go on YouTube. Don't do anything, right? No Teams calls, nothing, right? We're just doing that. And so you got to get all these calls in, and then you've got to direct them all over to different departments. And it's and a lot of these universities, they make about a third of their money from that. From that 3 days, and if those 3 days go a bit horribly wrong, then you chunked it out, right? But at the same time, if you can imagine if you're a UCAS student and you can't get your results, and it's a nightmare, isn't it? I remember my A levels.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So my A levels, I had a place in Manchester, and my dad said to me, "Why don't you go to London? Because I know you want to go to London." And so I went to clearing. I remember it was on the phone, right? Calling up the unis, trying to get a place in London on a maths degree.
This was old-fashioned phones, right? I suppose.
That's right. That's right.
Like this. People don't know what that means anymore.
No. I had a tap. It was 1991.
Oh man, you were modern.
Not 1981.
1981. Yeah.
But I remember doing that one as well. Dialing India and getting the wrong number was a nightmare.
Yeah, that's about 19 numbers, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
How long would a system typically last in universities then? I know it's off the shelf. How long? So I was reading another thing that talked about, I mentioned around the need to demonstrate. I think there's a need to demonstrate universities are spending the money better than they have done in the past. And one of the big drivers of that was digital transformation. I was just intrigued as to kind of, I assume there's not the legacy that you kind of see in kind of financial services and things like that, right?
There is actually. So higher education, their student information systems, 12 to 15 years.
Oh, right.
Yeah. The CRM systems they're looking at 15 years as well. So they put when they put a business case together. I think I spoke to one university. They're doing an ERP transformation. They put a 10-year business plan in, and for the student information transformation, they put in a 15-year business transformation. Yeah. So once they're in, they don't like change, right? So they are. Because one thing is that they're operating on a quite skinny budget because they're quite tight from an operational business point of view, because they've got this money for capex but don't have it for opex, and the people within they don't pay very well, right? So I think that's fair to say, right? Because we do a lot of offshore work with them, and it's the blend of the offshore rates that helps them cope with using our services. If it was our UK rates, it just wouldn't happen, right? So the pay's not great, although arguably they get better, whatever, pensions and all that. I'm not here to argue that part of it, right? So, but they got slightly better public sector type benefits, but you don't see that cash today, do you? So that sucks if you're 25 on 32 grand a year in central London, right? So it's just rubbish, right? So they don't pay very well. So inevitably they don't get the best people, or if they do get good people, they're inevitably going to leave, right? So they'll use it as a place to kind of go and then move on. And they operate, and then they've got these people that are under pressure as well. So because because they're not operationally got the best people, but they've got people who follow process really well, they don't take too kindly if you change the system every 6 months, right? It's not. It's not going to work.
A bunch of people I've worked with who are, good people, and they sort of came to the end of their career and they're like, right, I'm done with London, I've done this, and they take a job in local education, higher, local authorities, higher education, etc. So, and I've known about 2 or 3 of my mates that have done that, and the thing they struggled with was that getting anyone to make a decision was almost impossible. This whole idea, they immediately give you a project and stick you in a room so you go away and don't bother them, because you've got all this experience. You come back with this report in 12 days, and you say, right, this is what we need to do, blah 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 blah, and then them trying to go out then and say, look, this, we've got these 4 systems. We could merge into this system. I've looked around. These are the big 3. Let's get the three vendors in and grill the crap out of them for 2 days. 6 months later, that hasn't happened. Because of just the they just cannot cope with that.
And also the other thing that happens is that you put in your bid for capex, and it joins other bits of capex. So do we do a new building? Do we do new faculty? Do we do a new student recruitment bit? Do we open a new cafe that's going to make some money? So you're always competing with these new what I call bricks and mortar initiatives, right? And it's difficult to understand IT, right? So it goes back to what I said earlier. So if you've got your Wi-Fi rollout that you need to refresh, and it might cost you £3 million, but then you're competing with whatever a new building where it's going to be a student information center. There's going to be a pub and a bar and a cafe, and it's going to make potentially
it's far more tangible, isn't
it? Even though today's students don't get drunk like we used to, right? They're much more sensible. They're like avocado and stuff like that, and not kebabs. But that's a different story. But the point is that that you're right. It's far more tangible than this IT asset, which is making things happier, making people happier. Well, yeah, but I've got my 9,000 students anyway. So what does happier mean? How does that make me more money? So it's a difficult thing to kind of push through the digital transformation, other than doing more the same or cheaper.
Yeah, I imagine because there's not this kind of standing development team, because there's the kind of the gap between systems being implemented, they kind of go into freeze, I guess, for a time, and then they're replaced. There's a huge peak and trough, is there, in terms of knowledge acquisition, spend, in order to peak and trough, to make sure that you understand the system, to be able to replace the system, and then almost that drains off again as that funding change goes.
Yeah, so the big thing that I'm seeing at the moment within higher education is the migration from on-premise to cloud, right? So if they've got Microsoft Dynamics on-premise, they're moving to Microsoft 365, and then inevitably that means that their on-prem customized Microsoft has to be undone. There's data migration and there's testing. So that will go on, and then what a lot of them are now looking at is they will do every year. They'll revise the admissions process, the enrollment process, the exam process, the award process. So they'll do a minimum of 1 upgrade a year, or 1 change a year, but they'll put it in over 12 months. So they're trying to do it over 12 months. So that's leading.
All right, so still ticking over.
They're still ticking over. There's change going, but it's not kind of radical change.
Yeah.
And so they do that with a skinnier team, and they can use some of the operational teams, and then that's bringing over the conversations around automated testing for us.
Okay.
Right. Okay. We're now doing this incremental change over 12 months. We need to do automated testing. We need to do it quite regularly. But then what they don't quite understand is like, okay, if you're going to do this automated testing, you need to have some discipline around the test environments.
Yeah.
You need to have some discipline around the test data, and we need to do that. And by the way, when we're testing on that environment, you can't touch it. Like, what do you mean I can't touch it? Well, I still want to do stuff on there, but you can't, because I'm testing on it. Well, how long is that going to work for? How long is that going to go on for? Well, while I'm testing it, right? So they're understanding things around, having to schedule environments when test windows are going in, understanding test data and having to create test data, and understanding that you can't have every single permutation done, because it can be quite complex, right? So But that beats the opposite, which is, okay, let me find a student, let me go through the live data, let me find a student who's a bit late with their fees and got a library fine and whatever, flunked a couple of exams, is about to get kicked out. Like, right, let me run them through that process. I'm like, let's create you that data. So there is that. There is now an understanding that they need to do this test automation. How to do that test automation is still, it's a little bit of it's no different to any other industry where people that know absolutely nothing about test automation don't have any scripted tests, because UAT is done by the business, and business person puts down their mouse doing general ledger and does a few GL tests. So going, right, okay, yeah, it works. So it goes back to that checking, not testing type thing. So they do their checking. So to bring that formalization of checking into testing and a bit more validation, that takes a bit of an educational process. Then there's an educational process around, okay, we need to have the data, and they get that because they know they get fined, right? 10% of their revenue, right? So they feel that going, right, that's a very much data, that's very bad, you must use test data. And then the bit that they are starting to understand is that you need to have control around environments, you need to have schedules and process, but the environments is a bit more of a long-term story, because when they've gone from this on-prem to this cloud, they've signed up a 3-year deal with their vendor for X amount of environments. And so while there's environment control, it's more around environment scheduling, because they're not going to buy another environment because the CapEx budget is spent. It's like, no, well, when we do a renewal, I'll get a 5th environment, come back in 2027, right? So you've got to work within that environment, get the environment in the right state, get the right data in the environment, run the tests, and then delete the tests. And so that's kind of where we're finding challenges. And a lot of them are just going, well, why can't you just automate what I do manually? What's wrong with you? They look at me like there's something wrong with me. I've read about this test automation. I just need to record a process and I just go with it, right? And you have to kind of tell them, well, the test is stupid. The test needs to know what data it needs to do. The test needs to run through the process, and then at the end of that process, if a student graduates, it can't use the same student data. So I need to create 100 like that. And if my test fails, and also I can't have a test with 400 steps, because it runs through the library system and the student information system and the CRM system and the finance system, because if it fails on step 130 as an automated test, that's a real bugger's muddle to right?
Untangle,
I need to break it up into smaller bits, and then I need to report it back to you in this way. So that transformation bit is not working. Sometimes you go through it,
but that's not uncommon though, is it? That's not a higher education thing.
So today I got a thing going. Yeah, I've got a defect on Use Mango. Customer has an automated test that runs for 2 hours on SAP. And I'm like, right, okay. So they built a 2-hour test, an automated test that runs for 2 hours.
Yeah, red flag.
So an automated test that runs for 2 hours, it must be manually probably like 3 or 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
So half day I was going, oh god. So and they've raised it as a defect with the product. So I'm going back now to go, all right, actually, the consultants will go back and say, right, you need to break your test up into smaller chunks, and you'll still get the same output. This is what the report will look like, and they'll be like, but that's not doing the student journey. It is doing the student journey.
Just it is, yeah. Just not in the way that you know it as a user, right?
Right. Exactly. So that's the education kind of stuff that's going on. So they do get it, but obviously change, right? You have changing minds is quite difficult. But I think ultimately, from while the IT people in universities get it, I think ultimately the business still does not. So if you Google Pro Vice Chancellor and digital transformation, you might get 5 in listed on Google. Yeah, and some people I got heckled in a presentation once by a CIO of a university, and this is a CIO, and he said to me that. He goes to me, your presentation's all about IT. This is a HE conference.
I'm sorry, I can trump that one. Pun not intended. We were at a testing conference, and we were talking about, you built a model, you'd end up with more accurate tests. And this bloke said, but that means we get more bugs. And I mean, it did actually bring everyone to, there was jaw dropping. It was quite impressive, that the London testing conference, where what's the last thing you want to do is actually unearth bugs. Anyway, right, we're kind of running out of time here, Nalin. So Nalin, why don't you just talk a little bit about what could HE organizations do? I think you've mentioned some of them, which seem completely obvious to me, like getting someone on the board who actually, or the equivalent of the board, who understands that. What's the sort of core 4 or 5 things that they should do in terms of professionalizing how they kind of run the IT, short, medium, and long term? Because as you say, change is difficult.
I think culturally, the higher education needs to understand that its digital strategy is part of its core university strategy, right? So that, to me, the strategy of the Vice Chancellor has to not just say, I'm doing some IT, saying, I'm part of the IT, I'll be part of this decision-making process. I understand, I don't need to understand COBOL or Java or Python. I understand what the digital transformation is and the impact it will have on my institution. And this is and the CIO is part of our governance, board of governors, right? Rather than the CIO reports into the CFO or the COO and is an umbrella. So that is, I think, that the university that does that, and I suspect it will be an Asian university that'll probably do that first, or an American one. So they'll get there before that. But that is a critical bit. I think the other thing around it then is around pragmatism within IT delivery. Is that we understand as a vendor it's a journey, right? Because of the way that the budgets are set and the cycles are set, and you sign contracts. But for a priority, higher education needs to sort out its environments and data, because it wants all these nice things, right? It wants DevOps, it wants continuous integration, it wants continuous delivery, and it wants to do monthly and continuous improvement from a process point of view. But without proper environments in control, and if that means in the short term, let's just arrange how to book the environment to make sure the environments are in a state. So when your IT initiative needs to kick off, you're not going with 10 people going, we're up the hill. There's no environment.
Yeah.
Right, let's go down the hill, right? So there's got to be, there's got to be that kind of control around the environments, getting stuff in a ready state, because there's a huge amount of wastage that goes on in there. And then there's the bit around data and understanding data and getting that in, the systems within. And we've already discussed that some of the systems in there are fairly common.
Yeah.
60% of the universities use a common student information system. 50% use a common virtual learning.
I'm sort of curious. I'm curious about that, because we have an extremely standard approach now. When we come in, we plug our tools in, we point at as many data sources as we can. We do a basic scan. We infer as many relationships. We give some nice reports on potential relationships. We sit with the user. We say, are these right? And they go, yeah, no. You produce a nice picture. Everyone goes, wow, that's amazing. And then you say, okay, now give us some business terms. We map those business terms to the data. You then do some spot diagrams saying, well, your production environment is useless for testing because you only have about 4 of these outliers, and that's pretty much where all your bugs come from. And like you say, the one person who's joined left, and all those types of things. And then you say, right, now we understand that, let's just synthesize that data, usually through the front end using automation or APIs into your development environments. And you run that, pretty much every day. So in effect, simulating a live environment where you're pushing data in, pretending someone's typing. And bingo, you've got a lovely, juicy dev environment. And then you say, well, we're going to apply it to the new release. Let's create a dev version 2, and let's just upgrade those test data injection engines and run our analysis again, and just push in the data to that, run our tests on that. Bingo. That is pretty much 101 for us in terms of how you go about that. And it seems it really does elude people that is a concept. They just think it's so hard and it's impossible. And it comes back to your point earlier that, no one really understands our system because it's massively complicated, which every single CIO, CTO, QA manager has always said, it's a frickin' IT system, for God's sake, I mean, you might have 1,000 systems, but, all you're doing is testing the communication between 1 and 2 and understanding the data is flowing backwards and forwards and just repeat, so it's not that hard.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah.
I think that's the main thing, right? And then once they get that, they can then make those other initiatives. They can go.
Yeah.
They can do DevOps. They can do the Agile. They can do the continuous delivery. They can actually go much faster.
And I mean, this whole idea about not being paid well. I mean, the reality is, to be honest, some cases you don't want like a really experienced IT person. You just want a bright kid who's an intern. I mean, at the Bank of England have this apprenticeship program. They pay people who don't want to end up with £100,000 worth of debt. They come into the bank, and out of those, fine, they've got a few duds, but probably we would say they're some of the best IT people because they don't come with any baggage, and they just roll their sleeves and say, I'm going to use some Python. And as long as they're using a mainstream language and someone else can understand it, and they're actually writing some pretty cool scripts to do all this stuff and to pick up our product and generate really complicated payloads for ISO payment systems, which and this is a kid basically just done some A-levels. So, you can do a lot with not too much money. It's just things very much an attitude of mind and not being afraid to have a crack at it and experimenting a bit.
Experiment a bit, and also just working with different process, right? Expand different things, and experimenting is what you said, right? So try different things, and don't be afraid if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, Nalin. A pleasure as ever. I feel like there's bits of this conversation left on the floor here, so we might have to come back and maybe revisit this at some stage. All right, mate. Really great. Good to see you again. I will see you in London. And we'll have a vegan burger together. And
all right. I can do something vegetarian.
Cheers. Good to see you, man. All the best.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Why Didn't You Test That podcast. To continue the conversation, head over to curiositysoftware.ie and don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.